I know that we've got folks with other meetings that they've got to get to, and I'm not going to make you all late to the meetings. I think if we can get 45 minutes out of this, that's darn close enough to a freaking hour. So I think we're good. All right. So the first thing it says on the assignment is, let's talk about the facts. What is the issue that took place in this case study?
There was a lot.
Yeah.
I like, what do you like, boiling it down to one, or just talk about a couple of things that we noticed?
They just asked, what is the issue? And they're looking for everybody's perspective on what you think is the main issue in this case study.
Okay. I think part of it, maybe two-part, communication, but a lack of vision on what the organization as a whole wanted to accomplish. I feel like some of them wanted space exploration. Maybe some of them were more about the human element of it. And kind of tied up with that is that they were limited budget-wise. They didn't have the money capability to, I think, really accomplish a lot of their goals. So yeah, I don't know. I think there was a lot of different things, but maybe exactly what everybody, the politicians, the NASA management, and the people that work for NASA, what were they trying to accomplish? And then getting them right resources or communicating that, maybe.
I think that's a good point. That's a good point. Anybody else, what do y'all think was if you had to narrow it down to one issue, what was it? Was it a technical problem? Was it an organizational problem? A leadership problem? What do you think the root cause was?
I thought the root cause was, just the whole issue of the foam debris flying off the orbiter. I mean, it had been going on for the last 13 events. They had them listed in our case. There was 13 times that this has happened, and every time it just like seems to get buried further and further. At first they recognize it as a technical issue and they need to look into it, and it's a safety issue and this and that, and then it's almost like after a while this group think takes over where everybody's kind of like, oh, we need to continue our missions, and we don't want to be delayed in the future. And so I just feel like it's just something that got buried after a while and over the years. I mean, this happened over a number of years. I remember when the Challenger happened, exactly where I was. It was just like when JFK got killed. I remember exactly where I was, and I was right at work at the Military Sea Lift Command, and it was a big thing that this Challenger was going up into space, and I think there had even been discussions about this foam thing.
Oh, we lost Marie. Yeah, we'll see if she can reconnect. I'll keep my email open to see if she sends a message. But I looked at it, and I don't know. I might be stepping out on a limb here, but I think the root problem, the big problem here, the issue is prioritization of goals over people. And I think in any organization, we have goals and overarching goals and accomplishments, but I think the minute we put people second to the goals, that's when everything goes wrong. And I think that's exactly what NASA did. They took the value of the human life and made it less important than getting to space before the next competitor did.
Yeah.
I think if I were to choose one overarching, it was organization and not following through with communication up the line. I felt like that. I'm not sure that this Roca guy, who was the engineer that was pushing more information, I'm not sure if he ever got through to the project manager. It seemed like there was a lack of communication with the project manager.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Along that point, it looked like, if you looked at one of the diagrams, the organization itself looked very complex, and it looks like there's a lot of different chains of commands and a lot of different areas, and so that, like you said, the communication between, going up didn't reach the right people, and so I think the organizational structure, like you said, was another big issue. That's a good point.
I think too, like I don't work in a safety deal, but my brother-in-law is over safety for like this global company that like builds skyrise thing, whatever you call them, skyscrapers. And literally like, it's so insane the training they have to do for the safety, and how like you will get in so much trouble, if not fired, if you literally if you forget to just, snap in one belt part. Because for them, they're like, lives matter more than these skyscrapers. And so because of like my conversations with him, even though they're limited, when I was reading this, I was like, this is insanity. That the vibe I got anyway, and I could have read it wrong, but the vibe I got was literally like, we want to stay on schedule. We want to stay on schedule. We can't, we're competing with the other people to see who can fly into space first and who can land on the moon first and all this stuff. And like, and then it's like, so you see all these mishaps, and I was like, where's the whole people come first, humans come first over trying to fly into space? Like, why can't we delay these missions to make sure that this is, because I mean, there's still the risk. I get it. You're flying into space, you may not come back, but I felt like the whole safety for human life was never present in that case study. It was so like the priority was the schedule. Don't get delayed. We can't get behind. We have to fly this next mission in a month, and then 2-month turnaround. And so let's mark it as a casual thing, that it's not a big deal of the foam debris, if that makes any sense.
It does. And I'll tell you what sold it to me, and where I really hit home and realized that it was about the number of missions and beating the Europeans to the marketplace more than anything, is when I read the section that said that they were taking satellites into orbit for other people and other countries and other consumers, but they were taking them at a loss. They were charging them so much less than what the competitors were charging them that they were actually losing money. They were spending more money on getting the satellites into space than they were charging to get the satellites into space. Now, if any of us were to do that with our own checkbook, how long would we still have a house, right?
Not long.
Yeah, but that to me is an evident sign, was a very provident sign that, look, the money doesn't matter, the budget doesn't matter, the taxes money doesn't matter, and the people don't matter. What matters is beating the Europeans to space with more satellites and more missions and more launches than anything else. And that really, to me, hit home that there was no concern for the people. It was about the objective.
I counted up the number of people who were either organizations or people that were touching this issue, and there were no fewer than 61 either people or organizations. You would have thought somewhere along the line somebody would have said, okay, let's hold it. Let's figure out what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And I realized they were on a tight time frame. But if they had started, hi, bud.
Say hi to my class, Steph.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Good night, buddy. I love you.
Good night, Daddy.
If they had started on day 2 when it was discovered, they probably could have come up with a solution.
Yeah, I agree. So that leads me to the next question that I want to ask. And I'm kind of jumping around from what the script says, but I don't mind. I think this is going where the natural flow goes. So here's the question for you. When did the problems with Columbia begin?
Oh. Was it 1981?
When it was built? I want to say, because I go back to the finances. The government didn't fully fund what they wanted, so they weren't able to build the craft to the safety regulations. They had to skimp and kind of do what they could with cheap materials. And so I think it just started with, the finances and not really building the aircraft well or having a good design.
Kind of started at ground zero. If you have a poor plan, you're going to have poor results, right? Let me throw this out there and get your opinion. Does anyone think that the problem started with Challenger? And I'll explain more if I need to. Here's why I think the problem started with Challenger, is that the processes became problematic with Challenger and they rolled downhill. It even had that quote in there that after we had to pay how much money for the Rogers Commission to go out and investigate, that, oh yeah, you're right, the seals were bad. They came up with people making judgments like, oh, well, that's an acceptable risk. And I have a real hard time swallowing the term acceptable risk when 7 parents are on a space shuttle. So I just thought to myself that the problems with Columbia began way before Columbia was ever inceptive or was created, or the inception to make it came up. I think it started with the first launch. And to your point, Mitchell, yeah, they were rushing to get them all out, but I don't think, personally, I just don't think Columbia's challenges began with Columbia. They just carried over from the other disasters.
Yeah.
Built, though? It was the oldest one of the fleet. Or maybe that was after Challenger exploded, but I can't remember the timeline.
Can you guys hear me?
We can, Marie. How are you? We lost you for a little bit.
Yeah, I guess I lost my internet like last week. But it says on Exhibit 4 that the Columbia, that 300 tiles were replaced in April of 1981. And that was the beginning of the foam shedding events. So, and there was 13 of them.
Yeah.
So it does go back to the first Columbia.
Wow.
Yeah, and so, has anybody ever seen the space shuttle up close?
Not, oh yeah, no.
I did, and here's the thing: we went and visited some family in LA, and I looked at it, and we got to walk up and touch it, and I touched those, the infamous foam panels. Man, they felt like one of those cheap styrofoam coolers that you buy at the grocery store, glued on with black spray paint. I'm thinking, really, this is what we're protecting the life of our people with? But I didn't think anything about it until we read this case study, and I went, wow, that is pretty tricky. And they were literally held on with like spray glue adhesive almost.
Yeah, that's what it sounded.
So I think I cheated a little with this case study because I watched like an hour documentary about it.
I did too.
Good for you, though. Extra points for you.
I've always loved space travel. I've always wanted to see it. And I honestly do not remember in 2003, I was a junior in high school, and I don't remember this. I don't remember this event, and which is really, really weird. And so I watched the documentary, and it was crazy when they were talking about the foam and how they ran this experiment afterwards to try to prove that, yes, this foam can damage the underside of the spacecraft. Mm-hmm. And it literally blew a hole through the wing through it. And so the guy said he was excited, but then he was like, oh, that's why they died. Like he was able to prove, yes, this foam was causing damage to all the aircraft. And if you get one big enough, it can really do damage and ultimately lead to lives lost. And so it was just kind of interesting.
I completely agree. So here's another question for you then. And this one just was like neat fingernails on a chalkboard for me. But the question they're asking us is, why did the debris strikes become an acceptable risk?
Because someone decided. Someone made just a little decision.
Well, and I feel like, too, the people who did were those higher ups. And the vibe I got was that very authoritative, like, hierarchy of, like, you're just the engineers, we're the managers, we're the higher ups, so we have the final say, versus a collaborative effort of, like, hey, you guys are the ones that are actually making this stuff. We should probably value your opinion a little more, like, I don't know. That was the vibe I got.
I agree.
Yeah. There was never a big
I think
event.
over time, it became a group think. If you've heard that term, group think, where everybody just kind of accepts it and they want to move on and have future flights and everything. And so, they didn't think there would be another, they decided that this was not a safety issue anymore. It was an anomaly. And even after the second disaster, with the Columbia, after the first one, the Challenger, everybody even then denied that, what really happened, that, it wasn't the foam. So right away they said that, they didn't think it was the foam issue. So,
and you
I
know
don't
what?
know. Like from the beginning.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Marie.
Go ahead.
And I was just going to say, I looked at this, and as I read this, and I wrote my case study, and then I read the 5 dysfunctions, I immediately found the parallel, which was one of the 5 dysfunctions is when there's a lack of healthy conflict. And what everyone did here, everyone, including the engineer with the O-rings back on Columbia or from Challenger, all the way up to the guys screaming it's the foam panels, they stopped having healthy conflict. They stopped debating. They just rolled over. And once they rolled over, that let management say, hey, it's not that important. And then that led to that clause, and I'm going to paraphrase here because I don't have my case study open, where they said that, oh, we got away with it one time, so therefore it's less of a risk. And talk about rolling the dice to see when you're going to hit craps there. I mean, pardon the dice analogy in a room full of Mormons, but I think you get the point here. That talk about just Russian roulette is the actual term they used in the paper. If they would have pressed that healthy conflict dialogue a little bit more, maybe we could have solved some of these challenges.
I agree.
With some of the things that we were talking about, it made me want to look at what it cost, insurance liability afterwards, and the cost was $3 billion. That would have gone a long way towards figuring out the problem.
Yeah. Yep. And while the missions were there to do a lot of good things, to get satellites up in orbit that provide us with the wonderful internet service that both Marie and I have at our house, that was sarcastic there, Marie. While it provided those satellites out there that can make us impatient when we ask Google for an answer and have to wait 30 seconds for it to beam back from space. I mean, it did a lot of great things, but at some pretty bad costs that I think, I don't know, just... Could we have waited another year? I think we could have.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing,
and they never did the in-flight testing either, and that was a protocol that was supposed to be done. They only did ground testing, and I feel like if they would have followed through with that in-flight testing, that they would have figured out this issue, of the foam earlier, like that it was definitely a technical issue that needed to be fixed.
Yeah, I agree. And what I find funny is being in manufacturing for the last 24 years with the heating and air conditioning business. I can't make an air conditioner unless I put it through every possible test, a million ways till Sunday, pay for every certifying board to test it. And that's just something to make your house cool. Yet we can take something that costs billions of dollars and go, nah, that's good enough.
Maybe does that show the I don't know, the thought of the 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s before lawsuits and kind of the safety regulations that came in. Things were maybe a little more lax, which doesn't mean that it should be that way, but it's interesting.
You might be right there.
I think that's a good point, and I also wonder if it has something to do with the size of the entity thinking we're untouchable.
Yeah, I did mention. I think it was in actually the documentary how it mentioned that you know, it cost, I think, $1 billion for these rockets to go up, for these space shuttles to go up. And that's a lot of money back in the, you know, 70s through 90s. And they said that, you know, as long as, you know, they were successful and, you know, that people could see that, you know, it was kind of working and it's really exciting, that nobody would ask about the financials, that nobody would really see, you know, what's really going on behind the scenes with not even regards to the money, but, you know, like safety and yeah, it seemed like a lot of that stuff was just swept under the rug and just like, well, nobody's asking, so just keep doing it.
Yeah.
Which goes to leadership, you know, the leaders of the organization just didn't value that.
Not only the leadership, you know, I think probably the whole federal government, to tell you the truth, it was a real point of pride that we were moving ahead faster than the Russians or the Italians or whoever, and so kind of our national pride was on the line, and it's too bad.
Yeah, and I think if this were to happen today, there'd be a whole different scenario there. Because think about it, having grown up and being born in the early 70s and watching some of these disasters go forth, when I saw the first space shuttle explode, there was no way anybody was ever going to find out about the financial costs. If I wanted to find out anything, I had to wait for tomorrow's newspaper, and it was edited to the right way. There weren't multiple media channels out there streaming data. There weren't live broadcasts. I couldn't get the information at the touch of a fingertip, and there wasn't as much transparency. And you take that all the way up to 2003, that still wasn't quite there yet. But now we're an on-demand society where it's really hard for anybody to hide behind this stuff, right? So could the same exact thing happen today? Yes. But boy, would we have gotten to a root cause a lot faster. I bet we would have.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Okay. Well, I don't want to belittle it too much any longer than we have, and I know we have some other meetings, so I'm going to read what it said, how things turned out, and I don't think any of us will be surprised. So it says 7 months after the Columbia accident, the Columbia Accident Investigation Board, it's another group we had to create there. Sorry, I let that slip out there. Presented their report on the cause of the accident. Go figure. The board pinpointed the technical cause of the accident. It also identified organizational issues with NASA dating back decades. So decades. The CAIB also reported how management might have behaved differently during the mission and stressed the organizational shortcomings at NASA that contributed to the catastrophe. So what the board resulted was technical difficulties they didn't even address. They went straight to organizational. They went straight to management, and they said, hey, you know what? This goes all the way back decades to the beginning of, well, if you think about it, decades, that would have put it all the way back to the Apollo projects.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the organization had become so huge with 24,000 personnel. I mean, and their locations all over the country. So, you know, sometimes an organization gets too big.
Yeah, and on a side note, if anybody's ever been to Merritt Island, Florida now, that organization is a ghost town. I think their employment is, last time I checked with a friend of mine who worked there, they went from, 24,000 employees to under 5,000.
Wow. Amazing.
And, there's still a lot of good things that we could be doing out there, but I think that if I were to draw an analysis, and this is just, the gospel according to Jose, these cultural things and organizational things never got fixed. And when they don't get fixed, then other things happen, like severe cuts, dropping of programs, and all of a sudden, 21,000 people going, or 19,000 people going, whatever it was, looking for some new employment. The city of Merritt Island, Florida, has gone through an amazing economical downturn because that was their prime employer.
Yeah.
So anyways, that was the conclusion
That's
from
like
our
totally
paper.
over my head. P.S. I'm like nodding my head, trying to figure out like, I'm like, this just doesn't make any sense to me.
This whole thing is crazy, but like I said, because of their organizational challenges, they went from 24,000 employees to 5. And those 5 are basically monitoring existing programs like telescopes and satellites that are in space. And I mean, honestly, you think back, when's the last time you heard NASA in the news?
Yeah, you just
I think a lot of the contractors have taken over now, and they're doing civilian flights, is what I've heard.
Yeah, Tesla's got his own rocket. You know, not Tesla, but the Tesla company has got their own. Elon Musk has got his own rocket, and he's doing stuff. So,
right.
I think this is a really good case study because it goes to show, just like in the 5 dysfunctions, that if the team isn't right, the results will never be right.
You know what I liked about it, though it was hard to shuffle through it, it taught me the importance of letting go of some of the unimportant details that are really important. But if you're going to do a case study, you just can't get hung up on every little technical problem. You have to shuffle through it all. And it was really a teacher for me to see that.
Yeah, you kind of have to look over all the technical details and dig deep down to the root, don't you?
Yeah, and I was very happy that our instructor, Sister McHenry, you know, did that little video and told us don't get hung up on the technicalities of it, you know, and to
very helpful.
Just kind of, you know, realize that it's a problem with foam and don't get hung up on all the technicalities. So that really helped me in reviewing it. And I didn't feel like I needed to know every single person's name, every engineer's name, and, you know, all that. I think the only name that I remember is Linda Ham being the project manager. And I thought she should be fired. So that's what I wrote up in my case study, that, you know, she was really the project manager, and she's the one that really should have been fired a lot. Well, there were others too, but.
Well, I completely agree. And on that note, I'm going to quote Mr. Gump and say, well, that's all I have to say about that. And I'll turn it over to y'all. Is there anything else you guys want to add before we wrap up?
Does anybody know who does next week?
I can find out.
Does it start from the beginning again? Because I think, Jose, you were the last one. So then if it starts from the beginning, it might be you, Annette, because weren't you the first one?
Yes.
Let me find out. I have the schedule saved.
But I could be wrong.
I could not find my schedule.
That's contagious now. Okay, here we go. Group leader sign up. Yeah, so Annette, you're at lesson 9. And Mitchell, you have lesson 10. And then Killian, you've got lesson 12.
Yeah, okay.
I have 10.
Because there's nothing on 11, right?
Yeah, right. There's nothing on 11.
And there's nothing on 13 or 14 either?
No, our last one is 12.
Oh, you guys have to end it. Okay, great.
I may or may not be on the call next week because I'm traveling. So I may or may not be there, but if anybody's having challenges, I think I've got the technology side down pat now. Finally figured it all out. So I'm here to help. And I'll email you guys my cell phone number so you can text me if you need to. Okay. And then if anybody has any issues coming up, just let me know for the rest of the times. And if I need to fill in for anybody because you got something going on, please let me know. I know I missed the first few team meetings, so if I need to help cover for some folks, just let me know. Be more than happy to help out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for leading tonight.
All right, everybody. Thank you for a great meeting. Y'all have a great night, and we'll talk to you next week.
Good night.
All
right,
right.
bye.
Thank you. See you guys. Bye.